Today we're going to be comparing the tiny shock ability to the normal shock and also going over which one I think is better for the amount of energy you can spend to destroy a base. It's going to be a little different from a normal video, but we're still going to get some gameplay in and have some fun. So sit back and enjoy as I talk through these two abilities. So before we get started, I want to mention Jimmy and I are going live from our Discord server. Link is down below. And we're going to be going live in about 1 hour from when this video is being put out. So 10 a.m. Central Time on Saturday, 9/10/2022. So definitely come and join if you want to hang out. We're going to be playing Minecraft with our fans. So if you guys like Minecraft or if you just want to hang out and talk to us, a good thing about Discord is we can have people come off voice chat and you can talk to us about anything and we can just chat with you guys. So join the Discord server down below and we'll see you guys there. Back to the video. So the Tiny Shock is a temporary gunboat ability that comes out every so often. It's an ability we've seen plenty of times. You know exactly how it works. It is automatically leveled up for your base. So I have a level 14 Tiny Shock because my base is a higher level. If you're a lower level, you'll get a lower level Tiny Shock. At my level, I'm going to be comparing the Tiny Shock I have to the Tiny Shock or to the regular shock in my armory. Tiny Shock at level 14 lasts for 30 seconds. That's a really long time versus the regular shock lasts for 10 seconds. So it's a third of the time that the Tiny Shock or that the regular shock lasts versus the Tiny Shock. If we go into a player, we can see the two differences here. So the regular shock, as you know, targets as many buildings inside of the radius for 10 seconds. And you can actually target a lot of buildings, way more than you think. Like you can space it out so a lot of buildings are shocked at the same time. For example, here I could shock both the shock launcher and the doom cannon in one shock. The maximum range it lasts, so the diameter is 7. So 7 tiles long is too much. So in other words, it's a 3x3 defense in the middle with 2 tiles on each side. So for example, I could not shock the shock launcher and the doom cannon in that shock. They're both out of range. If one of those defenses are a tile closer, I could shock both of them at the same time. So it's really interesting, and it proves for some exciting and kind of complicated gameplay and base design. How you design your base, you don't want too many good defenses, prototype shock launchers, rocket launchers, boom cannons in one shock. Otherwise, you're really just helping the opponent defeat your base. So that is all about the shock. And now the Tiny Shock, as you guys know, or maybe you don't know, it shocks one defense for 30 seconds. So the time is a lot longer, but it's targeted against one defense. I think you can kind of see where I'm coming from, where I really feel like the Tiny Shock is going to be better against non-clumped up defenses that you really have to shock. And the regular shock is better for those clumped up defenses that you need to shock. So for example, I'm using a Bombardier heavy combination. This doom cannon, I really have to shock that. So I'm going to use the Tiny Shock because it lasts for 30 seconds. However, now that we're getting closer to the base and the shock launcher and the other boom cannon are all hooked onto me, I'm going to drop a regular shock here to shock those defenses because those defenses are all hurting me just as much as that one boom cannon was. And I actually stacked my shock, so that's the worst thing you can do when you shock one thing and then you shock it again with a secondary shock, whether that be a Tiny Shock, a regular shock, any sort of shock. So in my opinion, the Tiny Shock is good for those kind of one-off defenses that you really want to shock that are targeting your troops. For example, I'm not going to drop a regular shock on this boom cannon when I can just drop a Tiny Shock on it. Tiny Shock is also a lot cheaper than the normal shock, and it increases in price a lot cheaper. So that's almost Boom Beach's way of telling you they think the regular shock is more valuable in an attack like this than the Tiny Shock. However, I gotta say, for different troop combinations, it does change which ability is actually better. For something like Warriors, I really like the Tiny Shock because for Warrior combinations, let me load up Warriors. I haven't attacked with Warriors on this account in a really long time. So if I was attacking this base with warriors, we can see the shock launchers in range of the core. Now, usually when you use warriors, you want to shock the shock launchers and some splash around the core. So I'm going to use tiny shocks on those one-off defenses that are in range of the core that I really have to shock. Really, that's only the shock launchers that I really want to shock. And I'm going to drop my warriors, and my warriors with the core, they won't get hit. The tiny shock will take care of business. So let's do the attack here, and I can show you what I mean. And the regular shock, I'm going to drop around the core because I want it to shock splash around the core. So you definitely want to try to use the most out of both of these abilities, because if you are just using one of these abilities and kind of ignoring the other one, you're missing out on a huge opportunity, because the cost of these abilities drastically increases the more you use them. So this kind of was the perfect attack. I know I have way more energy that I could have dropped, but I tiny shocked the shock launchers so the shock launchers wouldn't hit my troops, and I regular shocked the splash damage around the core. And that shocks a lot of defenses around the core. I wouldn't want to drop a tiny shock around the core, just like I wouldn't want to drop a regular shock on the shock launchers where I don't care about the other defenses around the core. However, if I only have the regular shock, I'm still going to shock the shock launchers, because shock launchers, you kind of have to shock them when you're attacking with warriors. So another important part of tiny shock and another use case is not shocking your own troops. If I was attacking a base where, let's say that Doom Cannon was a microwaver that will hit you under smoke, that's really, really bad. And you don't want that microwaver to destroy your entire army. You can drop a tiny shock. It won't hit your troops. It will hit the microwaver. It'll shock the microwaver for the duration of the attack while you walk up. My camera just shifted. I don't know when that happened. But it'll shock for the majority of the attack. So you do kind of have to pay attention and use it in the right location at the right time. But it's a really nice ability once you kind of learn the ropes of the ability. It's pretty hard to compare to the regular shock versus like how much energy you should spend on both of them. For example, if I was attacking this base with Bombardier's Heavies, I see a Doom Cannon, 2 Doom Cannons, and a shock launcher. I 100% could drop a shock here, shock all 3 of them for 10 seconds, or I could drop 3 tiny shocks and shock each of them for 30 seconds. Well, 3 tiny shocks is really, really cheap. And 1 regular shock is also really cheap. However, if I'm planning on using another regular shock later in the base, it's worth it to use the 3 tiny shocks earlier. So you definitely want to plan ahead, make sure you kind of know what you're going to spend your energy on, and spend your energy on those things. Don't go out of the norm. So here, if I'm attacking this base with my Bombardier's Heavies, and I really did not want this Doom Cannon in action, I'm going to drop a tiny shock. I don't really care about the machine guns, the flamethrowers, the mortars when I'm attacking this base with Bombardier's Heavies or tanks, for example. All I care about is the Doom Cannon or Boom Cannon. So you definitely want to pay attention, take that opportunity cost, spend your energy on what's most important. Don't clump up shocks, and make sure you're shocking stuff with tiny shock. Take advantage of it because it is such a good ability when you get to know it. So finally, I just want to briefly go over the cost for each of these. So tiny shock goes from 3 to 6, so it increases by 3 each time. So if I drop 3 tiny shocks, that is 18 energy, versus the regular shock increases by 5 each time. So 1 shock is 7, 2 shocks is 12, total of 19. So 3 tiny shocks is kind of equivalent in energy to 2 regular shocks. So take that with a grain of salt. If there's 3 defenses that are in a clump, I probably would drop the regular shock unless you want to take full advantage of those full 30 seconds of shock, because the 30 seconds of shock is 3 times as good as the regular shock. So anyway, that's just a little information for you. I think I kind of discussed it as best as I could. Obviously, there's a lot of strategy when it comes to which of these is better. And my general rule of thumb is if there's just a random defense out in the open, tiny shock it. Versus if there's a clump of defenses, regular shock it. And it's really that simple. And of course, when I say defenses, I mean defenses that impact your attack combination. I'm not gonna shock a boom cannon when I'm using warriors, because obviously that's not really gonna do anything. I'm gonna shock flamethrowers, machine guns, rocket launchers with damage amplifiers, shock launchers. So take advantage of the shocks, but also only spend shocks on stuff you need. But I hope you all enjoyed the video. Hopefully you like this kind of strategy type of video. Let me know down below if you want to see more of it. So remember, guys, go join our Discord server and come to the live stream. It's going to be a blast, and we're looking forward to seeing you guys. Bye, guys.